Hi, hope you're well. Thank you for taking a bit of time out to listen to the Rich Fritzke Show. We have something precious and important to deal with this evening. I just saw earlier today a circa 19-year-old picture of Maggie's and my 12 huddled and smiling together on the bathing rock at Crater Lake in the Delaware Valley of New Jersey. They're all looking so precious and bright and so happy to be there. And then I looked deeper and I saw my 22 light up the life grandchildren, all of whom I am now COVID-19 isolated from. But the magic was in then picturing my Nana and Great Aunt Mary sitting on the bench immediately to the left of them, and my mom and Aunt Dot and Skip and Jack, two beloved uncles who were priests, playing Scrabble right where my 12 stood. And a 5-year-old me with his plastic boats in the shallow water, basking in the sun at peace with all the world on a perfect day. And there Jack, Agnes, and Patsy are fighting to be the last one standing on that old donut. Jack usually prevailed, as I recall. And my brothers and cousins and friends are slapping each other with towels on the dock immediately to the left. And there's Dad and Uncle Joe, Dot's Joe, sweating profusely as they work to get the water pump back online. And my handsome cousin Dave, Dot's own, is atop the lifeguard stand. Behind every inlet, every crevice, every raft, a slew of memories. I could see every house that sadly no longer stood. The lookout, Mullins Rock, and everywhere a face, a love, a memory. And I am as ever overwhelmed by the wonder. And there you are, and oh, the mighty blessings of it all. Yet here we stand or sit and ponder in a so very different day and time, isolated and distant, awaiting the light and promise of the taming of a pandemic. Both my Maggie and I grew up in big families, loving families. For me, it was always the excitement of the command performances that were ever in the offing, the cousins galore, best cousins, the wild anticipation before the gatherings of the clan and friends, every Memorial Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day weekends at the lake. Oh, what a family! And there's not an ugly one in the bunch, were signature phrases of our Nana, Agnes Cassidy, that still pleasantly haunt us all. But on this day, we pause to celebrate just one of the many of us. One who once upon a time and inevitably became the greatest and the brightest of all constellations within. And while there are thousands of stories, I have just one to share. I have the beginning of it all. The how it all began for Dorothy Bush or Dot Cassidy or Dot Wongberg or Mom or Aunt Dot, the boss of the beds at Crater Lake. But most importantly, the angelic whisperer that is in the ears of any and all who needed to be lifted back up from time to time. For there was ever the public condemnation and justice and the private reprieve of Aunt Dot, who would cover our flanks in our youth. She was the kind of aunt who would silently witness, even partake in the punishment or the price to be paid for your sneaking out in the middle of the night, only to instruct you the next day as to what to do better the next time, so as to get away with it. Yes, we need to celebrate her today. At 102 years young, yes, 102, still spirited and still losing love, and thank God released from a facility in PA in Scranton to her family in Lake Ariel just last Friday, where her children could be by her side and hold tight before releasing her to her God and a waiting throng of loved ones gone by. Good for her, for ours is a family of true believers. And yet still, Dot's was a light so bright that we are all swimming and treading water in muted darkness for the time being. Dot was the sweetheart who told every one of us that we were her favorite. and meant it too. Dot was the last of our tall timbers, the last of her greatest generation. Like the great sequoias and redwoods that rise majestically with their branches reaching out towards the heavens, the tall timbers have now all gone home to God. Strong, beautiful, larger than life. They were the generation that gave we baby boomers life. They and the virtue, honor, and goodness that defined them inevitably defined us, our parents and aunts and uncles, whose worldview and courage and faith were bigger than a Great Depression, and bigger than Hitler and Holocaust, and bigger than his world war, and bigger than the fear and angst of Cold War and nuclear annihilation. They were indeed the tall timbers, with roots that ran deep. They were just a bit higher than, a bit bigger than, a bit greater than, and just a bit closer to God. As I think of Dot and all of them now, it is impossible to do so without praying, both for and to, for their very lives were a manifested prayer, and they were and remain for an incomprehensible, can't quite get your arms wrapped around it eternity, our greatest gift. Today, my beautiful Aunt Dot has gone to heaven at 102 years young, intimate with all of us. It was she who so lovingly embraced my Maggie like no other 40 years ago, and she who intimately celebrated and picked up every one of us when we were most liable to fall. Here, the beginning of it all. And just for the record, you can thank my mom. For Dot Bush, who would later become Dot Cassidy, and later still Dot Wongberg, it all began with her friend, Rose Cassidy, who, yes, would later become Rose Fritzky, my own sweet mom, or Rosie, with whom Dot was spending her days in the heat and early summer on the streets of Jersey City, New Jersey in 1935. She had been introduced to Rose by a close mutual friend, Mimi, upon Dot's transfer to All Saints Commercial High School, whereupon the three of them got along famously, as best friends are wont to do. That was in the heart of the days when Frank Hague, the quintessential American big city boss, was still I am the law in Jersey City. There in Hague's kingdom, Dot and Rose lived and played upon a virtual lunar landscape that Barbara Ward would later suggest was largely devoid of the colors, scents, and textures of living things. Old Lincoln Park was there with its ball fields, monument to Lincoln and flowers, and trees did indeed line the avenues where the brownstones and many of the row houses puffed out their chests. But Jersey City was, for the most part, comprised of brick, cement, macadam, hot tar, and very small backyards. It was urban to the bone, and in the dog days of summer, you could, as the saying goes, fry the eggs on city sidewalks there. It is a story that notably began in the heart of the Great Worldwide Depression, in an era when money was beyond tight for lower middle and middle class families like theirs, when expendable income was virtually unheard of. So for 16-year-old girls from Jersey City, even finding a nickel for the old picture show or a new big band recording was highly unlikely, and there were few, if any, diversions. Truth is, all they really had to fall back upon was the church, Father John O'Brien, down the corner at All Saints, or up the hill at St. Patrick's, the radio, and the company of each other. The company of each other, I think, most of all. Frank Capra's It Happened One Night with Clark Gable and Claudia Colbert had cleaned up at that year's Academy Awards, and Fiddler McGee and Molly and a young hero by the name of Flash Gordon topped the radio programming charts. But it was largely an unsettled time. It was actually a time when genuine despair abounded, and millions were hauntingly searching for the vestiges of a hope upon which to cling and rebuild shattered lives around the nation and the world. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was promoting his fledgling New Deal and the National Industrial Recovery Act, and Adolf Hitler, in a foreboding sign of what was soon to come, was making military service in Germany mandatory and palpably flexing the muscles of his Reich. Back in Jersey City, where teenagers longed for healthy diversions, and while Haig lived in the lap of luxury at what was his then 2600 Hudson Avenue and later Kennedy Boulevard 2-floor suite, where he dined on sirloin steaks and sipped on his preferred aged scotches, the Cassidys at 243 Pacific Avenue did the best they could, as Rose Fritzky used to tell her children, to make today's lemonade out of yesterday's lemons and today's potato salad out of yesterday's potato peels. But the Cassidys of Jersey City also happened to be lucky, or what they rather looked upon as blessed, for they had an escape back then that few residents of Jersey City enjoyed, and a young Dot Cassidy was suddenly invited to share in that escape by my mom's mother, Agnes, one early July Saturday morning while she was visiting my mom. It was a wholly unexpected and out of the blue invitation, said Dot. "Dorothy," she said, "would you like to come up the lake with us today?" Up to the lake, by the way, was then code for the entire summer. Just the lake. There's no name mentioned, no Harding or Crater Lake, no descriptive term whatsoever to identify it or to separate it out from all of the other lakes out there in the world. That struck me, said Dot, and little did I realize that morning that I was going to go on referring to it as the lake myself forever. Well, Dot lived right by the banks of another lake, Lake Ariel, in Pennsylvania. There was still only one, the lake, in her vocabulary, and it wasn't Lake Ariel. Having immediately said yes to the woman who was to become forever known to her as Nana, and having responded with the emphatic word absolutely, Dot was immediately struck by two problems. The first was that she hadn't even checked in at home, and the second was that she had no idea what to bring. As it happened, her absolutely yes was quickly followed by what she described as near panic, for she had no clothes, no bathing suit, certainly no understanding as to what a trip to the lake required. She had to quickly take the city bus back home to pack whatever she could find. As our Rosie calmed her down, put her mind at ease, and assured her that she would come up with a bathing suit and shorts for her. And hey, not to worry, they could share. I got home as fast as I could, and I got some clothes together before beginning an adventure that opened up a whole new life, a whole new world to me, Dot recalled. While the next few hours were largely a blur, what she said she could never, ever forget was waiting at the bus stop on her way back to the Cassidys, when a car suddenly pulled up with an unidentified driver with dark sunglasses on in it. A bit startled, the strong and handsome driver leaned over, looked directly at her, and kindly asked, "Don't you need a ride?" Her knees buckled, and her heart skipped a number of beats, as she was shocked to see that it was Joe Cassidy, Rose's older brother, whom she had met at the house before, but with whom, however much she liked to look at him, she was not yet an item. After all, Joe then considered himself far too old for his little sister's friend. Why, he was all of 5 years older. Be that as it was, and while there was a great story that was soon to evolve, he had come to rescue Dot early that afternoon in order to move things along for all of them. Again, largely a blur, she recalled little about the journey, other than that the one she had a crush on was driving that car, that packed car, body on body crowded. The trip seemed to be oh so very long, as trips, I might add, to whole new worlds often do. It was indeed longer back then anyway, because the Route 10 West that they connected to in Essex County for the better part of the journey was one lane west all the way, as was Route 206 North, which they connected to in Netcon. Ike and the great interstates. Their time had yet to come. From there it was the picturesque winding country roads, all the way through Springdale, Frieden, Stillwater, or Middleville. Incredible roads, noted Dot, one more beautiful than the next, introducing her to a world as marvelous as the one that Dorothy found when she first entered Oz. That's exactly how Dot described it, as like the world that Dorothy found when she first entered Oz. When all you have known is the city and you meet the country for the first time, said Dot, it just takes your breath away. It sure took mine that day. I saw waterfalls and meandering streams and ponds and rolling fields and cows, lots and lots of cows and horses and big red barns and silos and so many farmhouses. I just saw so many things that I had simply never seen before. And I was in awe. I was in awe of all of it. Then it was up the famous, out-of-this-world mountain road with its prodigious elbows and knees. What was then a dirt road with steep 140 and near 180-degree turns. No guardrails. They did stop at the spring to collect drinking water near the top of that mountain. And finally they rode on what seemed to Dot to be little more than a trail through a dense forest on the mountain's crest. The spring itself was magical to me, said Dot. Every sight, every tree, the green forest. Oh, the ridge and that spectacular view. Even the path to the cottage and the simple green and white with the huge porch and oh, so many beds and day beds. All of it seemed magical to me, said Dot. Oh, the lake itself, spectacular, wonderful. The sheer beauty of it just overwhelmed. It was like stepping into heaven, said Dot. Everything, absolutely everything about it was heaven to me. The fresh air and the scent of the mountain, and my first glimpse at what was to forever be our lake or my lake, with its clear, pristine, refreshing waters. From that day forward, the thought of heaven and the lake would forever be bound together for me. Whenever I imagine heaven, I see the lake, whether in sunshine or in shadow. Heaven. She went to heaven indeed, and became a force at the switching station of the family that I and countless others, and that's others in all caps, were blessed to be part of. That other heaven, the one beyond our knowing, beyond our seeing, beyond our imagining, is now hers as well. The heaven that has for so long been in her ready hands. There where the Hosanna, Hosanna of well done, good and faithful servant has finally rung in her ears. There where she fell into the embrace of the Lord and of all of the other tall timbers, especially her gentle love, Joe Cassidy, the handsome driver who picked her up and drove her into the very heart of all of our lives. Her gentle Frank Wongbird and other loves, she could sure pick them, by the way. Her strikingly handsome son, my cousin David, who fell in Vietnam on November 22nd, 1968, 52 years ago. And my mom, our magnificent Rosie, ever a best friend, all meeting in the greening and youthful springs of their lives. Once and forever, today and always, now and forever, in and through her, our beloved Aunt Dot, we celebrate family, which is the only thing the good Lord ever really wanted us to be. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Aunt Dot, for saying yes to Rosie, yes to the lake, yes to Joe, yes to a life uncommon, and yes to loving us all so. The party is rocking the heavens this night, and Dot is dancing her heart away. Take care. Look forward to having you with me the next time around. We'll be back to you in short order. Bye now.